Behind every breakthrough is a simple idea, and MBA Day, second edition reveals the ones that matter. We will focus on what it says about management and thinking. Stay with me, the best part is near the end. Chapter 1: Visionary MBA Thinking, How to Embrace Change. Leadership 11, Entrepreneurship 12, Sustainability 13. Just Start Walking. Glossary. Index. Search settings. Q back. Support. Sign out. Erickson's Psychosocial Life Cycle Model of Development. Blank version of the Wheel of Life. A rich picture in Ishikawa or Fishbone. Cause and effect diagram. The psychological contract. Tuckman's Stages of Group Development. Bath Model of People and Performance. Supply-Demand Curve. Figure P3. SWOT Analysis. 6 Markets Model. The Product Life Cycle Model. Ansoff Matrix. Mitchell Stakeholder Typology. Pestel Analysis of the Banking Industry. Leadership Grid. Cotter 8 Steps of Change. Business Model. Canvas. Carroll Hierarchy of CSR Aims. Elkington 3BL. Introduction. Welcome to MBA Day by Day. This book is a guide to applying world-class MBA principles and thinking at work. Whether you have ambitions to do an MBA or already have one, in business and management those 3 letters certainly seem to exert quite a hold over the imagination. Every year, tens of thousands of managers around the world invest their time, energy, and money to graduate with a Master's degree in business administration. No book can equal that achievement or capture everything that years of study contain. It can, however, highlight 2 things that graduates from top business schools have discovered. The most lasting benefit of an MBA is a change in your thinking. Informed self-awareness is the key to new behaviors, better decision-making and continuing career growth. Presumably, managers already think, otherwise their actions would just be automatic. So, what is so special about the change in thinking brought about by an MBA? One answer could be simply that MBA thinking accelerates promotion to the next level. True, but a more powerful idea is that the best MBAs are people educated to see a special relationship between thinking and action that can make a real difference to achievement at work, one's career and the impact of business on a changing world. Using clear and concise language, this book will use the typical structure and experience of an MBA to challenge you to apply ideas and new ways of thinking about what you do. Key points about MBA Day by Day. Each chapter covers a crucial area of management and leadership featured in MBA study. You will find overviews of concepts, key models, frameworks, and theories, as well as real-world illustrations. You will be encouraged to practice the types of thinking developed in the top programs around the world. 3 assumptions underpin MBA Day by Day, and I want you to keep them in mind as you work through the book. An MBA links practice and theory, academic rigor mixed with practical, industry-specific knowledge of the kind that you develop simply by doing your job is a powerful equation. MBAs are good at combining these different kinds of knowledge. True, the more experience of the workplace you have, the more you can get from this book, but if you are at an early point in your career, you will also find many ways to apply MBA thinking to the lessons that the first few years of management always bring. An MBA challenges deep-set habits. What is required and rewarded early in a management career is not necessarily what is required or suitable at more senior levels. Success at entry and middle levels needs certain skills, but some of these habits can become barriers later in your career. Many of our habits are deep-set and are often taken for granted. They are difficult to spot and even harder to change or let go. An MBA is all about such personal development. An MBA addresses what it really takes to become a senior manager or leader. Business is now a global phenomenon. In only the last 50 years, the world has changed beyond recognition, and no doubt it will be transformed again completely in the coming half-century. Business schools are no better or worse at predicting the future than the rest of society, but they are great places to develop the critical and reflective thinking abilities required to work in uncertainty and change. It is not about what you learn, it is about knowing how you learn, how you think, and how you act as a leader. With awareness and dedication, you can begin to prepare yourself for leadership roles now. Structure of the book MBA Day by Day is organized in 4 parts. Chapter 2, Chapters 10-13, looks at visionary thinking in leadership. Look out for plenty of suggestions in day-by-day practice activities and questions for reflection throughout the book. Again, you may be tempted to skip these, but they are essential because such tasks get you exploring what you and others do in your organization. They may well challenge some of your core assumptions. In addition, at the end of each chapter, there are suggestions for further reading and extra questions that will help your personal development. A glossary containing management and MBA thinking concepts appears at the end. In the text, glossary entries are bold italics when they first appear. Chapter 3, Yourself and Management. MBA Day by Day, Making It Work for You. Reflection N. Serious thought and consideration management is a practical activity, and the key to being a better manager lies in thoughtful action, day by day. The key to thoughtful action lies in self-awareness. Learning about yourself never stops because reality never stops being your teacher. However, life can be your teacher only if you are awake to it, and, in this respect, the majority of managers are asleep. Management training is not enough because it is about behavior modification, not self-awareness. The aim of management training is to create dependency for answers on the trainer. Consequently, organizations invest time and money in staff development and meet only limited success. Management education is about awareness. The aim of management education is for you to free yourself from restraints to your thinking. There are thousands of business schools, but, believe it or not, there is no hard evidence that the MBA curriculum makes better decision-making. Good business schools are amazing places, and what these schools know is that, while content is important, education is about creating the right conditions to develop managerial identity and purpose. Here are 4 things you can do to get the most out of reading MBA Day by Day. Start getting to know yourself. Keep a notebook with you at all times, with outlines, if possible, to get you out of the habit of thinking in lists. Have plenty of pens and pencils to write with. Writing down your thoughts and your observations becomes a sort of conversation with yourself. Engage your brain. Our brains are amazing and they work through association, so start connecting to new ideas using the same principles your mind functions with. Learn how to draw a mind map. Visit Tony Busan's website www.thinkbusan.com if you are not already familiar with this tool. Consciously decide to be curious. Be an explorer. Open, non-judgmental curiosity is essential to creativity. Catch yourself whenever you say yes, but and replace that with yes, and see the difference it makes. Find some starting points for comparison. Rate yourself for each of the following and indicate whether you think you are below, at, or above average. Now, you're ready to go. Note 1: research shows that potential employers are mostly looking for the last 4, not the first 4. Search settings Q support sign out. Chapter 4, Management and Business. Management and the MBA. Your business needs you. The great myth is the manager as orchestra conductor. It's this idea of standing on a pedestal and you wave your baton and accounting comes in, and you wave it somewhere else and marketing chimes in with accounting, and they all sound very glorious. But management is more like orchestra conducting during rehearsals, when everything is going wrong. Henry Mintzberg, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, 20091. In a nutshell, the need for skilled managers has never been greater and, globally, the number of people in management is set to grow in the coming decades. The MBA reigns supreme as the badge of quality in business administration, yet only 1 in every 200 managers will get to do one. A business degree is a great thing, but you don't need one to start thinking about purpose and contribution to the bottom line. With discipline and curiosity, you can make huge strides in your professional life. In this chapter you will learn about the history and main functions of management, define the purpose of management, discover the structure and goals of the MBA, write your first reflections, and do your first activities for your daily management practice. Why this book? There may be many reasons why you have decided to read this book. Perhaps you are new to management and are feeling a bit overwhelmed. Equally, you could have plenty of experience but feel stuck in your career, as though you have reached a plateau. You may have a long list of specialist qualifications under your belt and are now beginning to think about an MBA as the next step. Or maybe you don't have formal education behind you, have improvised from day one and somehow fear being exposed for this. By the way, this is known as the imposter syndrome and is a lot more common in management than you might think. Alternatively, you may just be curious about business and education in general, or incredibly busy and feel that, if you were better informed, you would have a little more control over your career path. Whatever your story, there will be something in MBA day by day from which you can benefit. But, to find out what that is, you will need to do some critical thinking and some reflective writing as you go. So, before anything else, here are your first tasks. Chapter 5, Questions for Reflection. Why did you pick up this book? What is your management style? How would a colleague describe you? As you go through the book, I want you to develop the habit of regularly making such notes. This is one of the things that will lead you to reflective practice. More on this in Chapter 2, and, in Parts 2, 3 and 4, you will find a couple of reflection questions at the end of each chapter. An open mindset is the only route to insights from this book. Critical practice, that is, doing it with your eyes wide open, is a key facet of an MBA, so you will also see regular suggestions for things to apply or ideas to investigate in your own job. Here is the first. Chapter 6, Day-by-Day Practice. Make a list of at least 3 assumptions you've made about management. State the obvious. The more basic, the better. Now think about your organization. List another 3 things you take for granted or would never question about the place where you work. Look for things that need no explanation. Discuss your lists with friends or work colleagues. Assumption naming is an important thinking skill and not an easy one, but by the end of this book you should be able to see that each assumption you identified in the activity above sits on another that is more basic. And, even if you rated yourself as above average in critical thinking skills in the list I gave earlier, you may struggle to name all your own assumptions in your day-to-day activities as a manager. Carrying out these reflective tasks is part of training yourself to challenge how you see the world. Management. Since this is a book about management and the MBA, we should start by understanding what these terms mean. Having a job is nothing new, but the domain of management is a relatively modern notion. It has roots in the Industrial Revolution more than 200 years ago, so its meaning was forged in an era of corporate invention, mass production, division of labor and admiration for the methods of science. Industrialist societies have benefited from unparalleled advances in technology, improvements in public health and social welfare, establishment of global trade, and high standards of education. Yet, they have also seen exponential growth in human population, unquestioning exploitation of natural resources, destructive armed conflicts at every level from local to global, and repeated cycles of economic boom and bust. For better or worse, there can be little doubt that today business shapes and misshapes our world. There has never been a shortage of thinkers to make sense of all of this. In 1916, French mining engineer Henri Fayol published a seminal text on management. It contained 6 functions of management that have proved quite resilient: forecasting and planning, organizing, commanding or directing, coordinating, developing, outputs, controlling. Through feedback, Fayol's views were echoed by others. For example, U.S. engineer Frederick W. Taylor championed management as a precise science of time and motion. Taylorism belongs to a classical view of management built around technical rationality, and though it may now seem outdated, many organizations still owe something to it. The Ford Motor Company applied it to assembly line production and total quality management. TQM united, for a time, organizational hierarchy and supply chain in every department, as Six Sigma attempts to do today. The most influential voice shaping our understanding of the organization of business in the second half of the 20th century was Peter Drucker, who wrote extensively on the role of management in a wide variety of settings. Drucker made a number of accurate predictions and coined many terms, such as knowledge worker, outsourcing, and management by objective. One of the reasons his work remains important is his consistent belief that management is a matter of hierarchy and relationship. Do these views still hold true today? Well, yes, and no. Yes, in that we often rely on the past to show us the way to the future. Organizations, like people, derive a sense of identity from what has gone before, and there are many turning points from the past that, for better or worse, still matter in management thinking. Consider just 3. In 1888, a U.S. court held that a private corporation was entitled to the same constitutional protection and law as a U.S. citizen, and the concept of corporate personhood was born. The results? First, a population explosion of businesses that are born and die every year around the world. Second, we are now comfortable thinking of organizations as if they have minds, identities, rights, and ambitions entirely of their own. Third, huge diversity in what these corporate persons do, but almost no disparity in how they are organized, that is, they all tend to have the same basic structure. From 1927 to 1932, Elton Mayo conducted a series of experiments at Western Electric's Hawthorne plant in Chicago. A good management scientist, his original aim had been research on how the company's lighting products could boost productivity on any manufacturing shop floor. In trying to test for this, he unintentionally found that productivity under experimental conditions increased, no matter what variable was changed. At the time, no one made the connection with the context of an experiment itself. Little significance was seen in the social aspect of the study until the 1950s when, in a new era of behavioral psychology, others revisited those results and concluded that productivity had improved because supervisors and staff paid attention to each other. The Hawthorne effect was coined and the human relations movement was born. In the late 1950s, the Gordon and Howell Report, in the UK, and the Ford and Carnegie Foundation Report, in the USA, first strongly advocated the use of principles and practices from management science in the education of managers at business schools. Universities invested heavily in their business schools, the management disciplines took shape, and the MBA took off. This legacy still influences how your organization is set up, and these and other landmark moments have shaped management. But they are not the whole story. Management is constantly shifting and its definition is broad. Like all science, it will continue to evolve, but there is still no single, overarching theory of management. When economic times are hard, management is often blamed. Many, including some insiders, have accused business schools of being part of the problem, not the solution. Renowned Indian academic Sumantra Ghoshal warned against MBAs relying too much on the gloomy economic theory of greed and self-interest dominating business. Ghoshal believed that the job of senior management was not to change people but to change the context so that those people could flourish. Canadian strategy guru Henry Mintzberg has appealed to MBAs to use more thoughtful reflection on experience in the classroom. There are, indeed, many issues in today's business environment that call for new thinking, such as the following: an existential threat to our environment through the effects of human activity. Population growth, resource depletion, and climate change are challenging many taken for granted assumptions about our economic model and fundamentally challenging the business world to be part of a solution, not the problem. The rapid and accelerating changes being brought about by new technologies and by efforts to understand the uses and abuses of large amounts of data. There is a global shift towards artificial intelligence and an incorporation of networked computer systems into production, distribution, and research. Accumulating knowledge is no longer power. Power now comes from how you access and share information. The world of work is changing. Managing or leading others is no longer about authority and positions of power in a hierarchy, but rather your self-awareness and skills in connecting all the resources around you. Chapter 7: Questions for Reflection. What do you think the role of management in business is? How is management defined in the organization for which you work? The purpose of management. Value creation management is a proxy activity. Someone has to stand in for founders or shareholders when an organization becomes too big for those people to handle on their own. Therefore, fundamentally, a manager represents the interests of others. They cannot do entirely what they please. Another word for this interest is value. Management must create value and, wherever you are in an organization, you need to understand what is meant by this. Value traditionally is measured in business by money, by economic profit, which we cover in Chapter 5, but it can, and should, also be measured in other ways. Although profit margin is one measure, there are other metrics that can measure value, such as a care for what your customers are getting from the relationship, how suppliers are in tune with your internal processes, or the extent to which your fellow employees are contributing to those processes. When it comes down to it, the world wants managers who can make decisions under uncertainty, gather, process and analyze information quickly and thoroughly, communicate effectively on paper, and see the strategic connection inherent in every situation. To get all these things done, especially in larger organizations, the role of management is often layered into first, middle, and senior. First-level managers have three main tasks: learning from doing, gaining hands-on experience of the subject matter in their part of the organization is the best way to pick up basic knowledge skills. This is on-the-job training with some leeway given to learn from mistakes. Learning the ropes. Behind all the processes and systems lies the culture of the organization. This is the how we do things round here part, and is how it actually works. Over time, the new manager will pick up habits and shortcuts that minimize the need for trial and error. Taking on responsibility and decision-making, completing relatively basic management tasks such as meeting agreed targets or mastering limited staff supervision and development. The politics of the organization are rarely an obstacle at this level because there is little that you can do, usually, to rock the boat. Middle managers have all these plus three more: an informed curiosity, a hunger for new knowledge and for new ways of doing the job better. Self-preservation, the practical necessity to align with senior management's definition of value creation. This is a big one. Managers are constrained in what they can and can't do and must weigh up day-to-day decision-making between what subject knowledge and experience tell them and what politics will allow or condone. Responsibility for implementing small to medium-scale change. Middle management is mostly a process of adjusting what is already there, as opposed to creating new things from scratch. Middle managers rarely get the chance for visionary leadership. Middle management is the engine room for many organizations, but is the most exhausting level to be in. Effective middle managers may be given the chance, eventually, to lead at the top and, as senior managers, they get 3 additional tasks: stand in place of the founder or owners. Their task is, above all else, to decide what will maximize rather than destroy value for the shareholders of a business. This is despite the owners being only one category of stakeholder, and value being measurable in many other ways. Translate the vision and set the strategy. Ultimately, they are responsible not just for the direction but also for the consequences of everybody's actions. Keep eyes and ears open, continuously survey and interact with the external environment and prepare for the future context. Truly successful organizations are those that create an environment of possibility, trust and openness, where middle managers can reach their full potential as they create value for stakeholders. That, however, is rarely the case. Few people work harder than middle managers because they are the bridge between day-to-day operational tasks and the big picture. But in organizations with a confused context at the senior management level, their efforts can end in frustration and burnout. The good news is that the MBA is very relevant to the tasks of middle management and is preparation for the complexities and challenges of senior management and leadership. This is exciting. With the right ingredients, MBA thinking can be life-changing. Chapter 8. Questions for reflection. Which level of management do you work in? What tells you this? How do you feel within this organization? Make some notes under the following headings: long-term commitment, material rewards, current emotional state, professional pride. In summary, management involves acting with thoughtful purpose and intention, being the symbolic but active representative of the owners of a business or organization, consciously using resources to create value in a way that is socially and ethically acceptable, setting the context for future performance. The MBA we've discussed what management is. Now we'll look in a bit more detail at the MBA degree. The MBA is a generalist degree. It was first offered at Harvard in 1908, but management remained stubbornly vocational for several decades after that. In fact, the MBA did not gain much acceptance until the 1950s, when shifts in education policy and economic growth following the Second World War combined to create demand for qualified practitioners. It has not looked back. In the United States alone, more than 250,000 people are currently studying for an MBA, offered to them by nearly 1,000 institutions. The MBA now accounts for nearly 2/3 of all graduate business degrees. If you want to do an MBA in the United States, there are plenty of schools to choose from, but expect a 2-year full-time course and an average age among your fellow, largely non-US, classmates of 28. In Europe, where the MBA arrived in 1957 at INSEAD in France and in 1964 at London Business School, the market is dominated by part-time study and the average age is a lot higher. In emerging economies, the degree is rapidly growing as a mass-market product by big business schools and large universities. Class sizes in full-time MBAs may vary from a handful to several hundred, depending on the school. MBAs are expensive. Fees on many MBAs are high and usually don't include living costs or the opportunity cost of a year or two away from employment. Nearly everywhere, men still outnumber women in most MBA classes, as they do in the boardroom, something that business schools ought to be changing. Some are. The clutch of an MBA is an ambitious, power-hungry and brash male manager investing in a year or two off work, eager to show their competitive zeal and mental agility, and equally eager to trample over their colleagues to finish top of the class and get hired by a leading consultant or bank. There may be some people like that, but, actually, it's not representative of the majority of students, who are professionals with management experience and fewer expectations that the return on their study will be measured only in salary and bonuses. Why does anyone do an MBA? Management is a process of both personal identity and analytical sense-making. An MBA involves a lot of work in what is already the busiest period of a person's working life. Reading, writing assignments and exams, classroom discussions and group work, myriad adjustments in work-life balance and major changes in perspective and beliefs all are typical of the experience. An MBA is about understanding and then managing changes in the web of relationships between senior and middle levels of management. The value of doing one comes from the applicability of your learning to a range of industries, in a host of situations, across a world of cultural divides. An MBA will not make you a genius in every field, but it ought to equip you to manage, lead and inspire others who are experts in theirs. This requires good character, astute self-awareness, and strong thinking skills. So, why doesn't everyone do one? The majority of managers in the world will never do an MBA, and not just because there are many more managers than spaces. It's expensive, it consumes time that most people never seem to have in the first place, and it imbalances further the precarious mix of work, family, relationships, and other parts of your life. On top of that, there is nothing magic about a business school other than creating the right context for personal development. However, with determination and support, you can achieve many of the same results through self-awareness and application to self-study. MBA thinking, why is it so important? The goal of management training is to change or add behaviors and create dependency on the trainer. The goal of management education is to open the mind and eyes and create freedom from the educator. As we saw in the introduction, this book is about MBA thinking, or thinking like an MBA day by day. So, let us be clear and precise about thinking, because how you think is part of creating value. We use the word thinking in a number of ways. It can mean the background streams of conscious and semi-conscious images and ideas that pass through our minds, usually unchallenged, every day. We don't have to conjure them, thoughts just come and go. Equally, it can mean the deliberate mental process linking inquiry/explanation to reasoning/action. Largely, it is the second one of these that is MBA thinking, and it can be learned, but don't forget about the importance of the first. As you read on, keep in mind two important facts about thinking. Thinking is our way of dividing up a messy world into categories so that we can agree how to act for the best. If a category doesn't correspond to the way the world is, you will end up in trouble. We all have the ability to think about our thinking. This is a skill we can develop. What are concepts, frameworks, models, and theories? People who do an MBA often get a boost to self-confidence early on because new vocabulary and concepts picked up on the course can make a huge difference to how they feel and how others see them. Application and feedback are immediate. The MBA has its own grammar, so it will help to highlight a few important terms now. Concepts. Our way of making complexity manageable is by naming parts. A concept, or construct, is a name we give to an idea and is very handy for working with each other. Concepts are used together to build maps of ideas. Business contains a bewildering number of concepts, profit, competitive advantage, culture, etc., and these form the vocabulary of management. Frameworks, representations, often visual, of concepts that have something in common. A good framework is useful because it organizes your thinking in a structured way. The concepts in a framework are not connected in a particular sequence, and you could start anywhere. Models. With a model, it does matter where you start and in which order the concepts are placed because there is a relationship between them, cause and effect. Models are shortcuts. MBAs, academics, and business practitioners like them because they store wisdom and quickly let you apply other people's thinking to a given problem or question. There is a difference, however, between a model of something and a model for it. The former is descriptive and our best guess, the latter is prescriptive and a how-to guide. Occasionally, MBA models are both. Finally, the statistician George Box once said, essentially, all models are wrong, but some are useful, so keep this in mind. Theories are current best explanations for how we think the world works. Good theories aim to explain as wide a set of phenomena as possible and provide a basis for testing predictions. A better theory is one that explains more than its predecessor. Theories are there to help make sense of incoming information and are fine-tuned by trying to find their limits. MBAs are not attracted to theory usually until it's too late. Theory building is driven by curiosity. The 3 phases of a typical MBA program. Imagine you were creating an MBA curriculum. Where would you begin? With strategy? Leadership? Personal development? Study skills? Team building? Or would you launch into one of the functional modules? All these approaches exist, but most programs conform to 3 conventions: separate business and management into subjects, group subjects into parts/stages, sequence stages, usually from simple to complex, functional to strategic, and core to elective. This feels linear, and it is. You might also feel that this does not map exactly onto the messy world as you experience it at work, and it doesn't. But it is a way to organize a lot of ideas and content while you develop your reflective thinking skills as a manager. I want to make MBA day by day useful for those at work and those studying, so the book will follow roughly the same pattern. The thinking skills that the MBA develops can be seen to have 3 phases. Phase 1: tactical, using facts gained from experience to help make managerial decisions, taking action in line with existing strategy, networking, looking for incremental improvements, problem solving. Phase 2: strategic, using context, developing a relational view of situations, participating in strategy formation, communicating and implementing strategy, problem setting. Phase 3: visionary, asking what could be, being an independent learner, critical thinker, systematic questioner of assumptions and asker of unsettling questions, becoming an effective leader, problem dissolving. Because an MBA is about personal growth, running alongside these is a 4th type of thinking, reflective. It is, arguably, the most vital, but also the one that many MBA students and MBA programs neglect. Chapter 9: Day-by-Day Practice. Talk to at least one person who is in a senior role in your organization and find out how they got into management. What type of thinking, tactical, strategic, or visionary, does your current job require from you most? For most people, the career journey is experienced as parts that add up, step by step, to a whole. To be given greater responsibility in management first means proving you are competent at making decisions, solving problems, and directing the work of others. In important ways, things do change when you become responsible for more. Your decisions are bigger, fewer in number, based on a broader range of considerations and much less reversible. Putting it together, always learning at the end of each chapter, I will encourage you to think about how that part of the book fits into the bigger picture. Often, we say that we know what a manager is by combining what a manager does with what a manager thinks and knows. Everything you do as a manager happens in relation to everything else, and management is, by its nature, always interconnected. Each chapter in MBA Day by Day is a new perspective on the same thing. Before we consider those separate points of view, I want you to consider how much you know about the person you are. Further reading a classic text, HBR's 10 must-reads, The Essentials, 2011, Harvard Business Review Press. A collection of seminal articles in HBR by the big guns of management thinking. Going Deeper, a very short, fairly interesting and reasonably cheap book about studying organizations by Chris Gray, 2012, Sage Books. I really recommend this book, though it is a challenging read in some parts. Understanding Organizations by Charles Handy, 4th edition 1993, Penguin. A respected figure in management thinking and practice, Handy's book imaginatively shows how real people are what make organizations work. Watch This, Confessions of a Micromanager, Chi Huang's 2018 TED Talk, in which the Silicon Valley entrepreneur shares some lessons about management as his company grew. https://www. TED.com/talks/chi_Huang_confessions_of_a_recovering_micromanager/up next. Notes 1 https://www.wallstreetjournal.com/articles/SB100014240529702049088222. Fayol, H. and Stores, C. 2013, General and Industrial Management, Martino Fine Books. Gordon, R. and Howell, J. 1959, Higher Education for Business, Columbia University Press. Canning, R. Robert, I. et al., 1961, Report of the Committee on the Study of the Ford and Carnegie Foundation Reports, Accounting Review, American Accounting Association, 191. Ghoshal, S., 2005, Bad Management Theories Are Destroying Good Management Practices, Academy of Management Learning and Education, 4, 17591. Mintzberg, H. 2004, Managers, Not MBAs, A Hard Look at the Soft Practice of Managing and Management Development, Barrett Kohler Publishers. Box, G. and Draper, N. 1987, Empirical Model Building and Response Surfaces, John Wiley & Sons. Search Settings Q Support Sign Out. Chapter 10, Development and Personal. You and your personal development. Lifelong learning is a necessity, not a luxury. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within. Ralph Waldo Emerson. In a nutshell, good MBA programs rely on students who are both bright and self-aware, and I have the same philosophy for this book. I will ask you to reflect on your work and life experience and be honest about what you know and what you don't know, including what you pretend not to know, about yourself. This is part of personal development, but it is also linked to having management impact in an organization. In this chapter you will define reflection and reflective practice, think about different aspects of your personality, look at your strengths, and focus on setting development goals. Begin to think about your purpose. The keys to personal development. This chapter is unashamedly about you. Health and well-being are what sustain worldly success, but many of us have this the wrong way around. Before you go further, write down your answers to these questions for reflection. Chapter 11, Questions for Reflection. When was the last time you were able to stop, think, and reflect on your career? Thinking and action go together. What did you do next? We don't usually think about what's important in life until we face a crisis or a serious dilemma. Write some notes about A. the highest point in your life so far and B. the lowest point. Know thyself is an ancient instruction. It is both a call for introspective honesty and humility and a means to know where you belong in society. Personal development involves both your internal and external worlds. Self-awareness is the starting point for learning, so being aware of your personal values, beliefs, capabilities, and motivations is a route to emotional maturity in your thinking. I define personal development as the identification and removal of those restraints that limit the likelihood of sustainable individual, organizational, social, and environmental health and well-being. This is a bit of a mouthful, but the main message is about health and well-being at every level. When I begin a personal development journey with a group of MBAs, I want them to do 4 things: understand the concepts of reflection and reflective practice. Adopt a mindset of curiosity. Use this curiosity to ask questions. Get into the habit of writing things down. Taken together, these are a route to action. Time is precious. You're busy and may believe you can't afford to stop and think about what you do. I think that's why you can't afford not to. Reflection and reflective practice. If you are a mid-career manager, you're probably already too busy to think, let alone reflect. Most managers know reflection, if they know it at all, as part of a problem-solving process. Something goes wrong. Time is spent collectively or alone reviewing what happened in the hope that identifying the cause will improve the process. But this is limited. Reflection is much more than that. So, before we go on, here are some truths about reflection. It is always about unfinished business, the stuff that refuses to be parked or buried. You can't reflect on something if you haven't noticed it, and reflection is about discovering what is still absent after you have got that far. There are many ways to reflect and not all of them are comfortable. You will sometimes feel vulnerable. The point of reflection is, in the end, to get unstuck. As British philosopher Alan Watts once said, we are on a journey to where we are, and I think this is what reflection does for us. Managers sometimes use reflection as a technical tool to work out what went wrong in order to fix it, as, for example, in a lessons learned or project wash-up, and also as a more careful process of looking at what needs to change in order to align things to the overall goals of their organization. Or, they may apply reflection critically, questioning all assumptions underneath an issue. This deeper reflection sometimes can be a response to a major change or trauma where your world has been turned upside down, but it can also be found in the mundane and ordinary. We like to think of management as a highly ordered and predictable professional activity. But, if you think about how your normal working day in management actually goes, the chances are that you don't inhabit a Zen-like, unruffled state of expertise. Rather, you live in a world of constant interruption, surprise and frustration. In his book The Reflective Practitioner, U.S. academic Donald Schn. Noted that professionals who train for years in the neat and ordered world of theory actually do their jobs in the swampy lowlands of everyday experience. Management happens at the intersection of theory and practice, although most managers learn the skill of thinking on their feet before they become experts in theory. Intuition will work for you up to a point, but becoming expert in identifying underlying assumptions, which often includes the power relations and politics of the office, requires something extra. Reflection is the most important way to think through all the wider concerns than simply the problem in hand. Curiosity and self-awareness. If you want to apply what is in this book, your curiosity first needs to be woken up. Look back at your answers to the first couple of questions for reflection in Chapter 1. Was curiosity one of the reasons you picked up MBA day by day? Let us get curious now about 4 areas of personal development that MBAs often think of at the start of a program. Personality. Who am I? What is important to me? Proficiency. What am I good at? What do I need to develop? What are my goals? Purpose. What is my contribution to the world? Practice. What action should I take? What is stopping me? Let us look at each of these in turn. Personality. Who am I? What makes me the way I am? Is my character from nature or nurture? Is my personality fixed, or can it be changed? I have learned over the years, working alongside mature MBAs, that these are difficult questions to ask. In fact, the big one, who am I, is never fully answered. There are literally hundreds of tools, psychometric tests, and questionnaires out there to test a host of theories about personality, and I'll list some below. I believe that personality tests can be useful, but they have limits because any test is only as good as the theory behind it. The vast diversity of questionnaires and models is actually based on only a few core theories of character and personality, and the majority of tests are uncritical, and sometimes unaware, of the assumptions made by their underlying theory. One of the main ideas in this book is that you need to develop your ability to think critically, something that becomes more important the higher you get in management. For that reason, I think you should try to find as many ways as possible to investigate your personality. Values, beliefs, and psychometric tests. In every human civilization, values address the why of life, and they define us as humans, giving rise to collective principles and individual beliefs that guide and give meaning to our actions. Beliefs and principles differ between people and can change and evolve over time, but values are universal and, at an elemental level, are not a matter of choice. Universal values relate to being productive as a member of society, being moral or ethical with others belonging to society, the collective or a group, being aware of self. Management education often treats these values as measurable and rationally worked out by individuals. A more holistic approach says that values are messy, intuitive, and preverbal. Perhaps they are a bit of both. Beliefs are the shortcuts we use to make choices and behaviors, what everybody else actually sees about us and on which they judge us. Beliefs are rules, not opinions. In fact, most of our beliefs are habitual and rarely questioned. They hold us in place and are the bridge between actions and values. If you want to learn and grow, you will need to identify which beliefs are self-limiting and replace them. Most of us are very resistant to changing our beliefs because it risks changing our personality. Psychometrics is the attempt to measure a person's personality or character. For nearly 100 years, individuals and organizations have used a range of psychometric questionnaires to assess personality, and it's likely that you have come across several such instruments in your career. They work by converting a statistical analysis of your responses into a best guess report on attitudes, aptitudes, traits, characteristics, or preferences. One type of psychometric test measures aptitudes, skills, or preferences for behavior. Understanding what you are good at, or not good at, is a starting point for improving your skills. This popular focus on strengths in management learning is part of the positive psychology movement, which says that you should find out what you are good at and do more of it. Tom Rath's best-selling book StrengthsFinder is an example of this concept. Behaviors and attitudes can change, but personality traits are more fixed. Not surprisingly, many of the tests for this aspect of personality were developed from the psychoanalytical tradition. They promise better informed ways of understanding the self in relation to other types. The best known is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, a U.S. personality test loosely based on the work of Carl Jung. It is widely used to clarify orientation to the world across 4 dimensions through innate preferences in how you take in and process information. The 4 sets of preferences result in 16 personality types. MBTI is similar to the Keirsey temperament sorter, accessible online for free. The 5-factor model uses the acronym OCEAN as a way of remembering what are also called the Big 5 personality traits: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. The result is a very broad way of identifying self-reported traits with behaviors. In a similar way, measures of personal values and belief systems, such as Hogan-S motives, values, and preferences inventory, MVPI, encourage you to name your value set from a long list. Any of these may be a good starting place to think about what's important for you, but psychometric test results are seductive, and it's worth remembering a couple of caveats so that you avoid the trap of pigeonholing. They are not magic. When you fill out a questionnaire about yourself, it's likely that it will tell you what you already know. If the theory behind them is not correct, then the results will be of limited practical value for your personal development in the long run. It's better to use test scores alongside a range of other sources of information and to discuss your thoughts with colleagues and friends in order to arrive at an informed view of yourself. Proficiency: what am I good at? The statistical measurement of mental intelligence was not proposed until the beginning of the 20th century. Interest in IQ, or intelligence quotient, was fed by society's needs to find ways to assess and grade children in education and adults in work, a love of educational testing that has not diminished since. In recent years, the popularity of Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, EI, has also become durable. EI broadly covers self and social awareness, self-management, and interpersonal skills and was inspired by Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. EI is now becoming mainstream for many in learning, and often is combined with growing interest in the neuroscience of learning. Advances in our understanding of what the brain does when we learn have enabled us to map some of the process involved, though this is not quite the same as explaining the meaning of personality. Nevertheless, what am I good at? Is a fundamental question for every manager to ask. Chapter 12, Questions for Reflection. When you were young, what were you good at? What are you good at now? At work, what are you rewarded for? What are you good at but not rewarded for in your work life? Take a look at your answer to the first question above. Was it easy or difficult to come up with things in which you excel? What about weaknesses? Are they important also? What criteria do you use to measure success? The dominant indicator of personal effectiveness used by organizations is the concept of competency. Competencies are effective behaviors that drive outcomes. The idea is that, if certain skills can be developed, this will result in a high level of performance against the goals and targets set by your workplace. It may also be a sustainable advantage in the job market. In fact, competency-based practice is so widespread it would be difficult to find many companies that don't plan, measure, and evaluate managerial performance this way. Making a link between skills, effective behaviors, and outcomes is one way to find developmental gaps, but it is not the whole story, if only it were that simple. Not everything in management can be reduced to a measurable competency so easily. If you are intending to get on in your career, explore new directions, or even look for a way out, then a thorough reevaluation of personality type and perception is a start. My experience with MBAs has shown me that a more thought-provoking question to ask is, where are you in your life cycle? This is because the answer must involve you looking at yourself in relation to the world to understand your identity and purpose. Purpose: what is my contribution? Personal development is the process of advancing identity and self-knowledge, of developing talents, potential and employability across our lifespan. It involves us acknowledging where we are in the present, and sometimes letting go of things from our past. In Chapter 1, you were asked to reflect on why you had picked up this book. Did you identify a sense of challenge at work or a need to move on in your career? Would it have made sense for you to think about these things 5 or 10 years ago? Why not leave it until later in your career? Why now? Chapter 13, Day-by-Day Practice. Life chapters. This is a great exercise to do in order to identify patterns in your life and, perhaps, signals of what to let go. Imagine your life as if it were a book, with each stage or part its own chapter. First, try to draw a timeline to identify these stages and key events or turning points. Then, write a title and short summary for each chapter and include, if you can, transitions from one chapter to the next. Your book is unfinished, but you may now be able to identify patterns and recurring themes. What it means to be an adult is not a simple question. Danish-American psychiatrist Erik Erikson viewed life as a cycle from birth to death with 8 stages of development. As we go through life, biology, cognitive development and crucially the social environment combine naturally to trigger various struggles. Erikson called them crises, which we must deal with in order to understand a particular core value. The best known of Erikson's psychosocial transitions is probably the identity crisis of adolescence. Less well known are the 3 further stages of adulthood. It is those adult periods that cover your career. We leave adolescence and enter young adulthood, where our concern is learning what, and who, we care for. This is a formative period in our lives, one where we build relationships and families. Erikson believed that, from our mid-30s to our early 60s, we move to mature adulthood, where we are, inevitably, drawn outward to the question of our productivity and how we shape the world around us. At this stage, we face a crisis between generativity, or the extension of love into the future, and stagnation, which is this energy selfishly turned in to please only ourselves. Are we able to balance this societal role and this concern with how the world is for future generations and still leave time and space for ourselves? This is the personal context for management. If you can work through this, understanding both sides of the conflict, it can make it incredibly productive. Erikson's psychosocial life cycle model of development source, adapted by the author from Erikson, 1994, Identity and the Life Cycle, W. Norton and Company. Limited. Reproduced with permission. Chapter 14, Case Study. The power of contribution. In 2017, Rob Lines had reached a crossroads in his career. Having studied linguistics at a British university, he had worked in a number of Central European countries in the 1980s and 90s. In 1995 he joined the British Council, and his 23 years in that organization had been hugely rewarding and successful. He had risen through the ranks amid a series of directorships in the Middle East, India and the UK, and Deputy Director of Global Operations. This had culminated in the award of Companion in the Order of St. Michael and St. George, CMG, in recognition for promoting UK-India cultural and educational ties. With this under his belt, and with children now grown, Rob reached his 50s with all his energy and enthusiasm intact, but with a question mark as to what purpose it should be put. With his experience and credentials, a senior role in any one of a number of national or international organizations or advisory roles to others might be a logical next step. Instead, Rob chose to take time out to think. This was not to be idle time, however. Throughout my life, I have always given a lot of value and thought to impact, he says. I am now at a stage where impact is more important than ever. However, what has changed is the type of impact I want to make, and for what purpose. I look for opportunities where I feel my contribution can have a more direct positive impact on those I am working with, as well as the wider society. I want to be closer to this impact and to be able to see real tangible benefits to those that I am working directly with. In 2018, Rob committed to spending a year in India advising the leadership of Future Hope, a charity that provides housing, education, and homes to some of the most vulnerable street children in Kolkata. The thing that drives and motivates me, says Rob, is the direct, positive social impact I can make personally from the work I do. In return, I feel a greater sense of satisfaction and meaning from seeing the impact this has on individuals. We all face some of these inner questions during this period of our lives, after we have met the challenges of the first phase of adulthood. It's easy to see how the life cycle concept maps onto the challenges of moving from middle to senior management. You can compare this with Jim Collins' thoughts on leadership in Chapter 10. Chapter 15, Day-by-Day Practice. What are the 3 most important words or phrases in your life right now? Write these down. Ask a significant person in your life to do the same and then informally compare and discuss the result. Practice. What action should I take? What are your goals? As we established in the previous chapter, management is a purposive activity. It has an end in mind. Goal setting at work is, therefore, not usually a problem. When it comes to the personal, a lot of people have a hunch that something needs to change but cannot accurately say what that is, and often set up goals that are too vague, not compelling, or simply unmanageable. So, while it certainly helps to have developmental goals that are expressed in positive language, and for them to be measurable and precisely written out, only awareness of who and where you are right now is the essential part. You can then be flexible to new information as you go, which also brings you one step closer to understanding MBA thinking. Visionary managers become leaders not because they have all the answers but because they know they don't. When you begin with a very keen understanding of the current situation and a strong urge to move things in a certain direction, goals emerge. Then so do the actions to reach them. Chapter 16, Day-by-Day Practice. Write down, in as much detail as you can, A. One short-term work or career goal, B. One medium-term work or career goal, C. One long-term career goal. Share and discuss these goals with another person. For each, also tell another person the first concrete action you will take towards each. Telling someone else increases the likelihood of it happening. How to get more balanced work-life balance is about having a say in when, where, and how you work, and recognizing that it is healthy to try to achieve a fulfilling life both inside and outside work. Having your view accepted and respected by others, organizations, families, and society as a whole, is important in avoiding too much stress or burnout. While there are no hard and fast rules about how a person should divide up their lives, most of us will recognize a few major categories such as health, levels of attainment at work or in our career, relationships with those closest to us, and an inner world of self-actualization and purpose. Our lives are full of tensions, dilemmas, and choices, both at work and at home. A great way of seeing how things are balanced in your life is in a Wheel of Life, a diagnostic tool developed for coaching. Constructing your own wheel is a great way to identify and perhaps surprise yourself about where you need to put your energies. A blank version. You can recreate your own with labels such as physical environment, family and friends, career, money, health, recreation, significant other/spouse, spirituality. The choice is yours. To create your own Wheel of Life, first select 8 aspects of your life that are important to you and use each to label a segment. Decide, on a scale of 1-10, how satisfied you are at the moment with each. Then color in your own chart and, on your own or in conversation with someone else, identify which one needs action now. It might not be the one with the lowest score. Blank version of the Wheel of Life. Chapter 17, Day-by-Day Practice. Have a go at creating your own Wheel of Life. Use colored pencils to shade in the different sections. Do you have access to a professional or business coach at work? What are the pros and cons of working with one? The wheel is one of the most versatile prompts for noticing what is absent. You can even create variants that go deeper. How about a wheel of personal goals, or wheel of stress, or even a wheel of priorities? No wonder coaches love using it with clients. Coaching is still developing as a profession and is also now seen as a skill that managers need to have. Top executive coach Alison Hardingham, in her book The Coach's Coach, has this definition: as someone who helps another person or group of people articulate and achieve their goals through conversation with them. Coaching happens whenever that happens, and it happens all the time, not just in meetings with people who carry the title of coach. Managers should not be in a formal coaching relationship with their subordinates, but a coaching mindset energizes and refocuses and can be used in many different contexts. Managers often comment that their general approach to building and developing relationships improves as they coach and are coached by others. At the heart of the coaching is the ability to build rapport with another person. One useful framework for this is the GROW model developed by John Whitmore. This is a structured process for setting and clarifying development goals. Goal: dig or mine for topics and objectives that will challenge and engage you, and that will deliver real value for you, your organization, or the community you live in. Identify 2 or 3 primary goals and add a shine to each. Shape each one with a wording that makes it feel real and exciting. Your goals should inspire you and they should produce an emotional response in you. Reality: where are you now? What is the gap between this and where your goal sits? What is pushing you towards your goals? What is stopping you? Your reality changes all the time. As you move towards your goal, your reality moves as well. Options: these are alternatives, choices. Not choices for alternative goals, but choices on what actions you can take to move towards a given goal. Be as creative as you can. Will: the final step is to commit to action. Any procrastination or lack of motivation should be noted, it may be there for a reason. The GROW model is not linear. Finding tools to use in your career development early in your career. There is a strong case for a competency-based view of skills acquisition and for using personality assessment tools in a methodical and measurable way. But experience has taught me that these are less useful the more you progress and the older you get. Your skills and competencies become more fluid with experience. One good stepping stone between the two comes from Stephen Covey's book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This is a great set of questions to challenge yourself to take control of your personal development. Covey wants you to go from being dependent on others for your learning to independence, taking responsibility for yourself, through to interdependence, integrating with your context. Habits 1 to 4, going from dependence to independence. Be proactive, take responsibility for your personal development. Begin with the end in mind. If you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there, is the saying. Put first things first. Categorize tasks by importance, not urgency. Think win-win. Seek solutions to problems that benefit others as well as yourself. Habits 5 to 7, moving from independence to interdependence. Understand first, before trying to be understood. Shut up and listen. You will learn from others. Synergize. Creativity comes from combining ideas. Innovation is one of the emergent properties of this. Sharpen the saw, a mental attitude of constant improvement, lifelong learning. You need to shift focus from you just as a separate individual to you as an integrated part of a complex system. In 2004, Covey added an 8th habit: find your voice and inspire others to find theirs. Chapter 18, Day-by-Day Practice. The world of work is constantly changing. Remote working has been an option for many knowledge workers for some time, but does it work for a whole company? Watch the TED Talk Working from Home is Better for Business, by Matt Gullenweg, CEO and founder of Automatic, a distributed tech company with no offices. What do you think of their business model? Do you agree with his conclusions? Would distributed working help or hinder your organization? Chapter 19, Question for Reflection. How will the world of work change for you between now and retirement? Will you even retire? Putting it together, approaching management with an open mind. Management in the middle levels of organizations demands and rewards the efficient use of limited resources to meet short-term targets. Organizations will on the whole promote skills that solve problems and bring closure. This is stressful, if only because success and a changing world have a tendency to produce more work, not less. To be a better manager or leader, you need breakthrough management practice, which requires the following: self-awareness, self-knowledge, and reflective practice. This is not just a question of your strengths and weaknesses. Understanding complexity and uncertainty in the business environment. That is what MBA thinking develops. In the remainder of the book, we start to explore how this world operates. You will continue to be asked questions designed to improve your reflective practice. In addition, at the end of each chapter, there will be 1 or 2 personal development questions for you to consider. Further reading a classic text, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, 2007, Simon & Schuster. Going Deeper, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain, 2013, Penguin Books. Cain's book is a refreshing examination of a side of leadership and management we often don't hear about. Watch these: The Power of Vulnerability, Bren Brown's relaxed TEDx talk, given in 2013, which tells of her research into stories of wholeheartedness, strength, and self-esteem in vulnerability. https://www. TED.com/talks/Breen_Brown_on_vulnerability. Video extract of psychiatrist Viktor Frankl being interviewed in 1977 about his beliefs about the search for meaning. www. YouTube.com/watch. D=YPN2D_TGSIY. Notes 1 SCHN, D, 1983, The Reflective Practitioner, How Professionals Think in Action. Josie Base. Rath, T., 2007, StrengthsFinder, Gallup Press. Hardingham, A., 2004, The Coach's Coach, Personal Development for Personal Developers, Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. Whitmore, J., 2009, Coaching for Performance, Growing Human Potential and Purpose: The Principles and Practice of Coaching and Leadership, 4th edition. Nicholas Brealey Publishing. Covey, S., 2007, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Simon & Schuster. Facebook: The Way We Work page, TED, and Dropbox. Search settings: Q support. Sign out. Chapter 20, Tactical and Thinking. Tactical MBA Thinking, How to Organize Resources. Tactic, and a method used or a course of action followed in order to achieve an immediate or short-term aim. The conventional view of tactics is that they are what you use to deliver strategy. Tactical thinking includes the day-to-day implementation of agreed goals and describes the kind of decision-making that adjusts to the problems, dilemmas, and choices every manager meets as they do their job. What you do in those moments to keep your head above water is tactical, and this thinking occupies the majority of a middle manager's day. It involves organizing the resources in a business to create value. Remember, this is every manager's aim, using multiple methods for observation and measurement and repeated cycles of trial and error, making incremental improvements, not reinventing the wheel. Communication: short to medium-term planning and making relatively reversible decisions. Tactical thinking uses a sequential or lineal approach. If tactics are not aligned to the strategy of the organization, then the strategy can quickly come unstuck, and, when this happens, lower levels of management can find themselves trapped in office or corporate politics. There are 3 types of resource essential to creating value in a company: processes and operations, and how they are planned and improved; people, and what they do; money, and the microeconomics behind financial decisions. Tactical thinking is a bit like navigating towards a destination on a sailing ship. You are clear about where you are heading, but your course is affected by changing winds and by the movements of currents in the sea around you. You keep on course by constantly adjusting sails to get the most out of the conditions. The people, the processes, and the cash in your business are a bit like the sails on a ship. In this part, we will see in turn how each of these resources is organized as a function. Search settings: Q support. Sign out. Chapter 21, Operations and Processes. Processes and operations where design, decision, and function meet begin at the beginning, the king said, very gravely, and go on till you come to the end, then stop. Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. In a nutshell, all managers are day-to-day operations managers. Whether in the private or public sector, in for-profit or not-for-profit, large or small organizations, at the top or the bottom, almost every aspect of management can be seen as a contribution to activities that are organized, planned, and subject to evaluation. In short, they manage processes that make up the operations that deliver the goods and services. In this chapter you will learn about the background, context, and scope of the operations function, define the difference between tactical and strategic management of operations, apply the input transformation output model to processes, explore supply chain management. Doing is a process. Processes are activities that transform inputs to outputs. An operation may consist of many processes. For an MBA, it is essential to know something about processes and operations because no other subject gets this close to analyzing what an organization does. Doing what you do well may be the only difference between you and your competitors. Equally, the operations function has a strong claim for being where future strategy is translated into present activity. All strategy must, at some point, be turned into a process that works. This is a function always with one eye on today and another on tomorrow. Chapter 22, Day-by-Day Practice. Contact someone in your network and arrange to visit some of the operations of their organization. Be curious and ask questions while you are there and, later, Write a reflective account of what you saw. Compare with the processes you know. What was different? What was similar? What made you stop and think? Identify a known issue facing your business about which you can make a prediction. How will that issue affect how the business operates? These questions illustrate the all-pervasive nature of operations and process management and the tension between how things are best organized now versus what needs to be planned to prepare for the future. These twin tasks form the context for the management of processes and operations. Chapter 23, Case Study. Designing an Initial Response Service, IRS. British government policy aims at parity between mental and physical health provision, and one obstacle for patients, carers, and mental health professionals has been how difficult it is to get a response after a call for help. For mental health trusts, managing appropriate levels of support quickly and efficiently not only saves on resources and time, it reduces distress. The leadership team at Northumberland, Tyne and Ware NHS Foundation Trust, NTW, based in Sunderland, took on this challenge. Despite a hardworking and dedicated staff, delays caused by crisis teams being tied up in other cases were tying up scarce and more expensive stopgaps from other public services, such as the police. With no central coordinating system in place, referrals often were bounced around from one part of the system to another. NTW gathered a team of people, including experts in operations transformation who had worked at the local Nissan car factory. Their vast experience of operations management was brought to bear on analysis of every part of the patient pathway, which is the journey from referral, or call for help, to discharge. The Initial Response Service, IRS, was the result. All referrals and external calls are now routed to a single point with one telephone number. Non-clinical staff are robustly trained to take calls, triage and manage requests for information, advice, help and support from clinical staff as required. The service is available 24/7 and is open to everyone. Having multidisciplinary teams based in one place means response can be appropriate to crisis, up to and including going to see someone face-to-face in the community within an hour. Since going live, admission of Sunderland residents to psychiatric intensive care wards has halved and is below the national benchmark, while the proportion of those admitted who were detained under the Mental Health Act increased. This suggests much better diagnosis. A new street triage service has been set up, with trained police officers embedded in the IRS, and there has been a tenfold reduction in the number of people being detained, sectioned. For psychiatric assessment, GPs have direct and round-the-clock contact with every level of service and advice in one call, cutting back on paperwork and time access. Over 50% of referrals now come direct from those who use the service, including carers and families, as well as older people and those with learning disabilities. More than 80% of calls are non-clinical, with individuals asking for advice and information about services or appointments. Only 1% of all calls result in crisis home treatment and less than % in admission. Median length of stay for those who use services has fallen from 23 to 15 days compared to a national benchmark of 32 days. Finally, psychiatric bed costs have fallen by million per year. Adapted from Valued Care in Mental Health, Improving for Excellence, 2018, NHS Improvement. The context of managing processes and operations. It is useful to take the process view to understand a business because the effective and efficient management of operations is what generates value for the organization. Tactical decision-making in operations management is aimed at maintaining the capacity to meet the current needs and satisfy customers and stakeholders. To achieve this, operations management tends to break things down to constituent parts. Accordingly, operations management is about the design, implementation, evaluation, and improvement of the systems that deliver goods, products, or services of a business in the here and now. First-level managers typically focus on small-scale processes or single steps in bigger operations and may find themselves working purely at this level in their functional area. Strategic decision-making, at the other end, looks at providing goals for the future needs, and senior managers have to see how the types of process make sense in the context of the organization as a whole. The responsibility for bridging this capacity gap sits with middle managers. As a middle manager, you may be given responsibility for groups of steps or entire complex processes. Operations management will involve the design, implementation, evaluation, and improvement of processes that bridge the gap between the present and the future. Managers at this level have the sometimes difficult task of doing two things at once: aligning to strategic plans and requirements set from above while making sure the current setup runs smoothly. Although the tactical and strategic levels, the short-term and longer-term, should work in harmony, in reality this is far from easy. There are several reasons for this: language and culture. Different organizations and parts inside an organization define processes and their boundaries in different ways. Finding a common language, dealing with politics, and navigating the unwritten rules of how an organization functions all require time and effort. After mergers, acquisitions, or international expansions, this can be a significant factor. Complexity: the more processes are grouped together, the higher the level of complexity. Uncertainty: the more an organization projects into the future, the less it can be certain about where, when, and how value will be generated. When managing processes, some prefer what British researcher Peter Checkland called a hard systems approach, which uses an engineering mindset and simplifies the model of the system to lineal cause and effect. Here, many people just enjoy getting on with the job in a nuts and bolts sort of way. By contrast, a soft systems approach sees problems as ill-defined and process in terms of the varied views of all concerned. In practice, both approaches constitute the various models in use today. Input, transformation, output, ITO process mapping. There are three basic organizing concepts needed for any process: inputs, which are either resources being transformed or resources being used to transform. For example, in a winery, the grapes used to make a wine are the resources that are being transformed. In contrast, the knowledge required to judge the right time to harvest the grapes, the people who work in the winery, the vats, barrels and bottles in which the wine matures, and the money borrowed from the bank are all inputs used to transform something else. Inputs can be physical and may come from elements outside the organization such as suppliers. Transformation, or the part of the process where value is added by, for example, a material transformation or a change in physical location, ownership, or purpose and use. In the winery, this might involve not just the time it takes for the wine to ferment but also the management of the expectations of customers, perhaps in terms of branding. Outputs, goods and services, as well as any waste or byproducts from the transformation step. Outputs may be for external or internal customers, or other processes. Outputs, in the winery, would include the wine in labeled bottles, and also the residues from cleaning the equipment or the skins from the grapes. Highly structured processes in assembly line manufacturing, such as the automotive industry, have provided much of the background and terminology used in operations management. But, even if you're managing in a company whose products are intangible services, what you do can be understood in terms of inputs, transformations, and outputs. Process maps, rich pictures, and decision trees when you need to get detail. A visual way of mapping the passage of any good or service is by using process flow charts. These can be a useful starting point for defining, describing, and analyzing exactly how your business works. Process flow charts can be made at 3 levels. High level covers the major events in the process only. Detailed has every step mapped, including decision points, cues, and feedback loops. Swim lane extends to show detail of actions by the multiple roles in the process. Process flow charts are okay for constructing the flow of an operation at a very broad level but can quickly become bogged down in technical detail if you try to map everything that happens or could happen. They are also limited in identifying issues that are not part of A. That is the heart of MBA Day, 2nd edition. If it helped, a quick subscribe keeps more summaries coming. So how do management and thinking connect? That is exactly where we started. Go back to the top and watch it click into place.